Perek Chav Zayin, Mishnah Tes, a lovely, beautiful Mishnah. Sodin shu Tomei Midras. You've got a sheet which is Tomei Midras, which is fine. Sheets are able to be Mekabel Tumas Medras because they're Roy Shchiva. So you've got a Sodin which is an Av HaTumas and Medras L'Tumah. Then Va'asoi Viloin. You turn the sheet into a curtain. Now we had earlier in Perek Chav Mishnah Vav the Din that if you turn a sheet which is Roy L'Tumas Medras into a curtain is not Roy L'Tumas Medras because you can't sleep in a curtain. However, it's still a Kli, it's still a Beged, and is able to be Mekabel Tumah. The Mishnah says, the Gemara says, because the waiter, when he stands next to the curtain and he feels a bit cold, will sometimes wrap himself up in the beg, in the curtain. Therefore, it's not royal and medras. You don't put your weight on it, but it's still called a kli. So we have a situation where it's an avatuma, because it's medras, and you turn it into a curtain. At that point, it is no longer able to retain its tumas medras because it's not royal and medras. The medras part is broken. Says the Mishnah, Toim and Amedris. Yes, it becomes Toim and Amedris. The original Avatuma just falls away. However, is the curtain now completely Torah? In other words, I've taken a curtain which was an Avatuma. I've taken a sheet which was an Avatuma. I've converted it into a curtain which is not able to be an Avatuma, but the curtain is still able to be a Rishalatuma. So the Avatuma Medris falls away, that's for sure. Says the Tanna Kama, Al Tomei Maga Medris. The curtain just drops down a notch from being an Avatuma to a Rishalatuma because it's touched the Medris. But you may say to me, once it hasn't touched any Medris. It was a Medris, and now it's no longer a Medris. We mentioned this before in the previous Mishnah. The Tanna Kama holds that the curtain, the minute it became a Medris, it is touching itself the whole time. Inside it, internally, Beis HaStorim, it's touching itself. Therefore, every fibre of the curtain is not only a medras, every fibre is also a maga medras, it's also a rishon tumah, as well as an avatuma. Therefore, when the medras falls away, because now it is no longer able to be a medras because it's now a curtain, however, because a curtain can be a maga medras, it can be a rishon tumah if it were to touch a medras, Tanna Kama holds that this curtain has been touching itself all along, and therefore the curtain has always been a rishon tumah as well, and therefore just changing a sheet into a curtain, if it's a rishon tumah, isn't going to do anything. It's only the medras that changes, but the kabbalas tumah of the ability to be mekabel tumah as a rishon tumah doesn't change, and therefore the medras, the curtain, the sheet before was a medras and a rishon together. Hanging it up and changing it to a curtain gets rid of the medras, but the old maga medras, the old rishon tumah, stays. Omer Rabbi Yossi, he doesn't like this. He says, medras nogazeh. The curtain can only be a maga medras if it actually physically touched a medras. It didn't. It just touched itself internally. He holds that Tumas Beis HaStorim, you cannot touch yourself internally, and therefore all it was a pure medras, an avatuma. Therefore, when you change it into a curtain, the medras falls away. But we never considered the curtain to be touching itself, so that we are now going to give this curtain, had been giving this curtain, a din of a rishon atumas maga medras. In other words, according to Rabbi Yossi, the curtain is completely Torah, because nothing has touched it to make it, nothing has touched it externally to make it a maga medras, says Rabbi Yossi. I agree. If lechatchila, elam ke noga by hazov, lechatchila, when the zov made it a medras, when he sat on it, if the zov also touched it with his bare skin right from the beginning, then I agree, the curtain at that point became a medras because the zov sat on it. It became a maga medras, a rishon tumah, because the zov also touched it. Then I agree that if the curtain, if the sheet, before you converted into a curtain, had in it a dual tumah of being a medras because the zov sat on it, and a maga medras because the zov touched it, then I agree that when you change it into a curtain, tomei b'maga hazov, the medras falls away, but the original magas of the rishon tumah which it had, which it got when the zov touched it with its skin, stays along. But if I didn't have that original negias hazov, and I'm dealing with a pure medras, and the only rishon tumah you want to impute is the rishon tumah that the medras gives itself the whole time, fibre to fibre internally, with a tumas beis historim, that I do not agree. That's not called a tumas maga, and therefore if that's the case, the curtain actually becomes tor, the sheet becomes tor when you convert it into a curtain. Brilliant. And a similar idea will have Mitzvah Shem coming up in Mishnah.